Hello, and welcome to the Reader's Advisory for Native American and Indigenous Peoples Heritage Month. My name is Amanda DeLand, and I am a Librarian 1 at Accokeek Branch Library. As part of Prince George's County Memorial Library System's celebration of Indigenous heritage, we have selected some of our collection's best books written by or starring Native people to spotlight, including some personal favorites. Be sure to check out the Native American and Indigenous Peoples Heritage Hub on our page afterward for even more titles to browse. Before we begin, as residents of Prince George's County, we would like to acknowledge that we gather on the traditional lands of the Maanpii, the Patuxent, the Piscataway, the Mogollon, the Pamunkey, and the past and the present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. The books I am covering in this program are roughly in order of age appropriateness. Each section will have a list of titles covered at the beginning, so if you want to skip to a section that interests you, look for that list of books. The full list of all titles discussed will be available at the end of the program. All ages are subject to each person's judgment of what they are able to read. The first section we will cover is picture books for children. The first book is Mi'kmaq Daily Drum by Alan Syliboy. In the style of the wildly popular Mi'kmaq Animals baby board book, shortlisted for the Lillian Shepherd Memorial Award for Excellence in Illustration, comes Mi'kmaq Daily Drum. From celebrated artist Alan Syliboy, this vital book for the youngest readers showcases 7 of Syliboy's popular daily drum artworks, each paired with a different day of the week. From Spirit Woman to Caribou to Round Dance, Mi'kmaq cultures and teachings are offered up to newborns and toddlers in a vibrant and accessible book. The next book is Berry Song by Michaela Goade. On an island at the edge of a wide, wild sea, a girl and her grandmother gathered gifts from the earth: salmon from the stream, herring eggs from the ocean, and in the forest, a world of berries. Salmonberry, cloudberry, blueberry, nagoonberry, huckleberry, snowberry, strawberry, crowberry. As a young Tlingit girl collects wild berries over the seasons, she sings with her grandmother as she learns to speak to the land and listen when the land speaks back. Through the seasons, they sing to the land as the land sings to them. Brimming with joy and gratitude in every step of their journey, they forge a deeper kinship with both the earth and the generations that came before, joining in the song that connects us all. Michaela Goade's luminous rendering of water and forest, berries and jams, glows with her love of the land and offers an invitation to readers to deepen their own relationship with the earth. The next book is Pow Wow Day by Traci Sorell, illustrated by Madeline Goodnight. In this uplifting contemporary Native American story, River is recovering from illness and can't dance at the powwow this year. Will she ever dance again? River wants so badly to dance, as she does every year. In this uplifting and contemporary picture book, perfect for beginning readers, follow River's journey from feeling isolated after an illness to learning the healing power of community. This book contains additional information that explains the history and functions of powwows, which are commonplace across the United States and Canada, and are open to both Native Americans and non-Native visitors. Author Traci Sorell is a member of the Cherokee Nation, and illustrator Madeline Goodnight is a member of the Chickasaw Nation. The next book is Thunder and the Noise Storms by Jeffrey Paul Ansloos. When the world gets too loud and chaotic, A young boy's grandfather helps him listen with wonder instead. Kids laughing, sneakers squeaking, balls bouncing. For Thunder, the sounds of the school day often brew into overwhelming noise storms. But when Thunder's Mosom asks him what he hears on an urban nature walk, Thunder starts to understand how sounds like bird wings flapping and rushing water can help him feel calm and connected. Gentle, inviting illustrations by Joshua Mangishig Powestekli emphasize Mosom's lessons about the healing power of the world around us. Buffalo Wild by Deirdre Havrelock. Pictures by Asby Whitecalf. An exuberant celebration of the buffalo's return to the wild. Since Declan was born, his kokum has shared her love of buffalo through stories and art, but Declan longs to see real buffalo. Then, one magical night, herds of majestic creatures stampede down from the sky. That's when things really get wild. Asby Whitecalf's playful illustrations add to the joy and reverence in Deirdre Havrelock's picture book debut. A reprinting of the Buffalo Treaty and an author's note describe the importance of buffalo to Indigenous people and efforts to revitalize the species. The next book is Maanda ezhi-gkendmaanh. This is How I Know by Brittany Luby. In this lyrical story poem, written in Anishinaabe and English, a child and grandmother explore their surroundings, taking pleasure in the familiar sights that each new season brings. We accompany them through warm summer days full of wildflowers, bees, and blueberries. Then fall, when bears feast before hibernation and forest mushrooms are ripe for harvest. Winter mornings begin in darkness, as deer, mice, and other animals search for food. While spring brings green shoots poking through melting snow and the chirping of peepers. The next book is On the Trapline by David A. Robertson. Illustrated by award-winning illustrator Julie Flett. A boy and Mosham, his grandpa, take a trip together to visit a place of great meaning to Mosham. A trapline is where people hunt and live off the land, and it was where Mosham grew up. As they embark on their northern journey, the child repeatedly asks his grandfather, "Is this your trapline?" Along the way, the boy finds himself imagining what life was like 2 generations ago, a life that appears to be both different from and similar to his life now. This is a heartfelt story about memory, imagination, and intergenerational connection that perfectly captures the experience of a young child's wonder as he is introduced to places and stories that hold meaning for his family. Next, we have some seasonal books, starting with When Pumpkins Fly by Margaret Lawrence, illustrated by Amanda Sandland. The air is cold, the nights are long, and Halloween is just around the corner. This is the time of year when pumpkins fly. In the remote fly-in community of Sankilluaq, Nunavut, the last cargo flight of October brings some strange orange guests for the children. Seeing a pumpkin for the first time, the local kids eagerly carve and light their first jack-o'-lantern. But when everyone adjourns to the community hall for the Halloween dance, the pumpkin is left alone outside. The land around Sankilluaq is home to many spirits who love to cause mischief, especially this time of year. But what would a land spirit do with a pumpkin? This adorable book gives young readers a window into how Halloween is celebrated in an Arctic Inuit community, incorporating contemporary celebrations and Inuit folklore. The Day the Earth Rose Up by Alfreda Beartrack-Algeo. When 7 Lakota sisters venture deep into the forest to gather choke cherries, they are surprised and chased by a giant bear. As they huddle together on a rock ledge and pray for help, the earth rises up, taking them out of reach of the bear. A great eagle rescues the 7 sisters by taking them to the Star Nation, where they become the Pleiades star formation that we see in the night sky. Keepunumuk, Weea chumun's Thanksgiving Story by Danielle Greendeer, Anthony Perry, and Alexis Bunton, illustrated by Gary Meaches Sr. In this Wampanoag story, told in a native tradition, 2 kids from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe learn the story of Weea chumun, corn, and the first Thanksgiving. The Thanksgiving story that most Americans know celebrates the Pilgrims, but without members of the Wampanoag tribe who already lived on the land where the Pilgrims settled, the Pilgrims would never have made it through their first winter. And without Weea chumun, the corn crop, the native people wouldn't have helped. An important picture book honoring both the history and tradition that surrounds the story of the first Thanksgiving. Next, we have some nonfiction books, starting with Indigenous Peoples Day by Katrina M. Phillips. Indigenous Peoples Day is about celebrating. The second Monday in October is a day to honor Native American people, their histories, and cultures. People mark the day with food, dancing, and songs. Readers will discover how a shared holiday can have multiple traditions and be celebrated in all sorts of ways. The Water Lady, How Darlene Arvizo Helps a Thirsty Navajo Nation by Alice B. McGinty. Illustrations by Shanto Begay. This inspiring picture book tells the true story of a woman who brings desperately needed water to families on the Navajo reservation every day. Underneath the New Mexican sky, a Navajo boy named Cody finds that his family's barrels of water are empty. He checks the chicken coop. Nothing. He walks down the road to the horse's watering hole. Dry. Meanwhile, a few miles away, Darlene Arvizo drives a school bus and picks students up for school. After dropping them off, she heads to another job. She drives her big yellow tanker truck to the water tower, fills it with 3,000 gallons of water, and returns to the reservation, bringing water to Cody's family and many, many others. Here is the incredible and inspiring true story of a Native American woman who continuously gives back to her community and celebrates her people. Sharices Big Voice, A Native Kid Becomes a Congresswoman by Sharice Richards. Illustrations by Joshua Mangshig Powis-Steckley. This acclaimed picture book autobiography tells the triumphant story of Sharice Davids, one of the first Native American women elected to Congress and the first LGBTQ congressperson to represent Kansas. When Sharice Davids was young, she never thought she'd be in Congress, and she never thought she'd be one of the first Native American women in Congress. During her campaign, she heard from a lot of doubters. They said she couldn't win because of how she looked, who she loved, and where she came from. But everyone's path looks different, and everyone's path has obstacles. And this is the remarkable story of Sharice Davids' path to Congress. Beautifully illustrated by Joshua Mangshig Powis-Steckley, an Ojibwe woodland artist, this powerful autobiographical picture book teaches readers to use their big voice and that everyone deserves to be seen and heard. The back matter includes information about the Ho-Chunk, written by former Ho-Chunk President John Greendeer, an artist note, and an inspiring letter to children from Sharice Davids. This ends the children's picture books section of the Reader's Advisory. Next, we have the juvenile books for ages 5 to 12. The first book is The Second Chance of Benjamin Waterfalls by James Bird. Benjamin Waterfalls comes from a broken home, and the quickest fix he's found for his life is to fill that emptiness with stuff he steals and then sells. But he's been caught one too many times, and when he appears before a tough judge, his mother proposes sending him to boot camp at the Ojibwe reservation where they used to live. Soon he is on his way to Grand Portage, Minnesota, to live with his father, the man Benny hasn't seen in years. Not only is boot camp not what he expects, but his rehabilitation seems to be in the hands of the tribal leader's daughter, who wears a mask. Why? Finding the answer to this and so many other questions proved tougher than any military-style boot camp. Will answers be enough for Benny to turn his life around and embrace his second chance? The next book is The Star That Always Stays by Anna Rose Johnson. Growing up on Beaver Island, Grandpa told Norvia stories. Stories about her ancestor Migizi, about Bboong Ke Onini, the Winter Maker, about the Crane clan and the Reindeer clan. He sang her songs in the old language, and her grandmothers taught her how to make story quilts and maple candy. On the island, Norvia was proud of her Ojibwe heritage. Things are different in the city. Here, Norvia's mother forces her to pretend she's not native at all, even to Mr. Ward, Ma's new husband, and to Vernon, Norvia's irritating new stepbrother. In fact, there are a lot of changes in the city. 10-cent movies, gleaming soda shops, speedy automobiles, 9th grade. It's dizzying for a girl who grew up on the forested shores of Lake Michigan. Despite the move, the upheaval, and the looming threat of World War, Norvia and her siblings, all 5 of them, are determined to make 1914 their best year ever. Norvia is certain that her future depends on it, and upon her discretion. But how can she have the best year ever if she has to hide who she truly is? The next book is The Case of Windy Lake by Michael Hutchinson. Windy Lake is a fictional First Nation in the midst of the boreal forest and a connection of lakes and rivers. The community is conflicted over a nearby mine, which has the support of the chief and the council, but is a source of concern for First Nation families connected to the land. As part of the agreement with the community, the mine must do an archaeological assessment of any new land they might disturb. Unfortunately, soon after his arrival, the old archaeologist doing the survey goes missing. It's a perfect case for the mighty muskrats, a group of cousins. Sam, Chickadee, Otter, and Atim, who use the mysteries they come across to explore the community, their culture, the land, and its history. This is the first in a series of Mighty Muskrats mysteries. Tapway and the Magic Hat by Buffy St. Marie. Tapway can't wait to spend a week with his cousins on the other side of the Cree Reserve, especially since Kokom, his grandma, has given him the most amazing gift, a magic hat with bluebirds and grass snakes that come to life. Tapway is so excited that he soon forgets Kokom's advice. Watch out for tricksters. Tapway's adventure is everything he imagined. He meets his cousins, takes part in a powwow, and sleeps in a teepee. But soon he's reminded of Kokom's words. Is his new friend Wapos leading him astray with mischief? This book includes a glossary and Cree pronunciation guide for all the words in Cree. Next book is Borders by Thomas King and Natasha Donovan. Borders is a masterfully told story of a boy and his mother whose road trip is thwarted at the border when they identify their citizenship as Blackfoot. Refusing to identify as either American or Canadian first bars their entry into the US and then their return into Canada. In the limbo between countries, they find power in their connection to their identity and to each other. Borders explores nationhood from an Indigenous perspective and resonates deeply with themes of identity, justice, and belonging. The next book is Rabbit Chase by Elizabeth LaPensie, illustrated by Casey Oster. Amy, a non-binary Anishinaabe middle schooler, is on a class trip to offer gifts to Payensag, the water spirits known to protect the land. While stories are told about the water spirits and the threat of the land being taken over for development, Amy zones out, distracting themselves from the bullying and isolation they've experienced since expressing their non-binary identity. When Amy accidentally wanders off, they are transported to an alternate dimension populated by traditional Anishinaabe figures in a story inspired by Alice in Wonderland. To gain the way back home, Amy is called on to help Trickster by hunting down dark water spirits with guidance from Payensag. On their journey, Amy faces off with the land-grabbing queen and her robotic guards and fights the dark water spirits against increasingly stacked odds. Illustrated by Casey Oster with a modern take on their own Ojibwe style and culture representation, Rabbit Chase is a story of self-discovery, community, and finding one's place in the world. Next story is The Res Detectives by Steve Paul Judd, Tveli Jacob, and M.K. Peaker. This summer, Tasembo just wants to chill. But that's not an option when it's a scorching day on the reservation and the ice cream man is a no-show. In an attempt to impress his crush by solving the mystery, Tasembo joins forces with his neighbor, Nuseka, and his dog, Billy Jack, to take on their first case as the Res Dog Detectives. With twists around every corner, this case won't crack itself, but when you combine Nuseka's brains, Billy Jack's loyalty, and Tasembo's persistence, justice will be served. Cold, that is. Next book is Thunderous by M.L. Smoker and Natalie Peterson. If Ayana hears one more traditional Lakota story, she'll scream. More interested in her social media presence than her Native American heritage, Ayana is shocked when she suddenly finds herself in a magical world with no cell coverage. Pursued by the trickster Raven, Ayana struggles to get back home, but is helped by friends and allies she meets along the way. Her dangerous journey through the spirit world tests her fortitude and challenges her to embrace her Lakota heritage. But will it be enough to defeat the cruel and powerful Raven? The next anthology, is The Woman in the Woods and Other North American Stories. Be careful of what you accept from spirits. Loop-Guro, trickster rabbits, and spirits with names that can't be spoken. The plains and forests of North America are alive with characters like these, all waiting to meet you in this collection of folklore retold in comics. This 5th volume of the Cautionary Fables and Fairy Tales anthology series features updated takes on Native American stories from tribes spanning the continent, bursting with bedside tales that are thrilling, chilling, and most of all, inspiring. Featuring the work of Jordan Arledge, Maija Ambrose Plamondon, Milo Applejohn, and more. Living Ghosts and Mischievous Monsters. Chilling American Indian Stories by Dan C. Jones. Dark figures in the night, an owl's cry on the wind, monsters watching from the edge of the wood. Some of the creatures in these pages might only have a message for you, but some are the stuff of nightmares. These 32 short stories, from tales passed down for generations to accounts that could have happened yesterday, are collected from the thriving tradition of ghost stories from American Indian cultures across North America. Prepare for stories of witches and walking dolls, hungry skeletons, La Llorona and Deer Woman, and other supernatural beings ready to chill you to the bone. Dan Susawed Jones, Ponca Nation, tells of his own encounters and selects his favorite spooky, eerie, surprising, and spine-tingling stories, all paired with haunting art by Weshayat Olvatre of the Tongva Nation. We Are Still Here, Native American Truths That Everyone Should Know by Traci Sorell, illustrated by Fran Lissac. Too often, Native American history is treated as a finished chapter instead of relevant and ongoing. This companion book to the award-winning We Are Grateful, ezhi-gkendmaanh, offers readers everything they never learned in school about Native American peoples' past, present, and future. Precise lyrical writing presents topics including forced assimilation, such as boarding schools, land allotment and Native tribal reorganization, termination, the US government not recognizing tribes as nations, Native urban relocation from reservations, self-determination, tribal self-empowerment, Native civil rights, the Indian Child Welfare Act, religious freedom, economic development, including casino development, Native language revival efforts, cultural persistence, and nationhood. Ella Cara Deloria, Dakota Language Protector by Diane Wilson. Ella Cara Deloria loved to listen to her family tell stories in the Dakota language. She recorded many American Indian people's stories and languages, and shared them with everyone. She helped protect her people's language for future generations, and also wrote stories of her own. Her story is a Minnesota Native American life. Classified: The Secret Career of Mary Golda Ross, Cherokee Aerospace Engineer, by Traci Sorell, with illustrations by Natasha Donovan. Cherokee author Traci Sorell and Métis illustrator Natasha Donovan trace Ross's journey from being the only girl in a high school math class to becoming a teacher pursuing an engineering degree, joining the top-secret Skunk Works division of Lockheed, and becoming a mentor for Native Americans and young women interested in engineering. In addition, the narrative highlights Cherokee values, including education, working cooperatively, remaining humble, and helping ensure equal opportunity and education for all. Maria Tolchief by Christine Day. In this chapter book biography by award-winning author Christine Day, readers learn about the amazing life of Maria Tolchief and how she persisted. Maria Tolchief loved to dance, but was told that she might need to change her Osage name to one that sounded more Russian to make it as a professional ballerina. She refused and worked hard at dancing her best, becoming America's first prima ballerina. Many famous American ballets were created for Maria. Complete with an introduction from Chelsea Clinton, black and white illustrations throughout, and a list of ways that readers can follow in Maria Tolchief's footsteps and make a difference. Indigenous America by Liam MacDonald. The true story of the United States' indigenous beginnings. American schoolchildren have long been taught that their country was discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1492. But the history of Native Americans in the United States goes back tens of thousands of years prior to Columbus's and other colonizers' arrival. So what's the true history? Complete with an 8-page color photo insert, Indigenous America introduces and amplifies the oral and written histories that have long been left out of American history books. What the Eagle Sees, Indigenous Stories of Rebellion and Renewal by Eldon Yellowhorn and Kathy Lowinger. What do people do when their civilization is invaded? Indigenous people have been faced with disease, war, broken promises, and forced assimilation. Despite crushing losses and insurmountable challenges, they formed new nations from the remnants of old ones. They adopted new ideas and built on them. They fought back, and they kept their cultures alive. When the only possible victory was survival, they survived. In this brilliant follow-up to Turtle Island, esteemed academic Eldon Yellowhorn and award-winning author Kathy Lowinger team up again, this time to tell us the stories of what Indigenous people did when invaders arrived on their homelands. What the Eagle Sees shares accounts of the people, places, and events that have mattered in Indigenous history from a vastly underrepresented perspective, an Indigenous viewpoint. Encyclopedia of American Indian History and Culture by Cynthia O'Brien. More than 160 tribes are featured in this outstanding new encyclopedia, which presents a comprehensive overview of the history of North America's native peoples. From the Apache to the Zuni, readers will learn about each tribe's history, traditions, and culture, including the impact of European expansion across the land and how tribes live today. Features include maps of ancestral lands, timelines of important events and dates, fact boxes for each tribe, bios of influential American Indians such as Sitting Bull, sidebars on daily life, homes, food, clothing, jewelry, and games. Did you know facts with photographs and traditional native stories? The design is compelling and colorful, packaged with full color photographs. To help give kids the lay of the land, this reference is arranged by region and all federally recognized tribes are included. With nothing comparable available, it is sure to be a valuable resource for kids, students, librarians, and families. This ends our juvenile section. The next section is the teen books. Here we have our teen books, starting with A Snake Falls to Earth by Darcy Little Badger. Nina is a Lipan girl in our world. She's always felt there was something more out there. She still believes in the old stories. Ollie is a cottonmouth kid from the land of spirits and monsters. Like all cottonmouths, he's been cast from home. He's found a new one on the banks of the bottomless lake. Nina and Ollie have no idea the other exists, but a catastrophic event on Earth and a strange sickness that befalls Ollie's best friend will drive their worlds together in ways they haven't been in centuries, and there are some who will kill to keep them apart. Walking in Two Worlds by Wab Kiinu. In the real world, Bugs with Z is a shy and self-conscious Indigenous teen who faces the stress of teenage angst and life on the res. But in the virtual world, her alter ego is not just confident, but dominant in a massively multiplayer video game universe. Feng is a teenage boy who has been sent from China to live with his aunt, a doctor on the res, and after his online activity suggests that he may be developing extremist sympathies. Meeting each other in real life as well as in the virtual world, Bugs and Fang immediately relate to each other as outsiders and as avid gamers. And as their connection is strengthened through their virtual adventures, they find that they have much in common in the real world, too. Both must decide what to do in the face of temptation and pitfalls, and both must grapple with the impacts of family changes and community trauma. But betrayal threatens everything Bugs has built in the virtual world as well as her relationships in the real world. And it will take all her newfound strength to restore her friendship with Fang and reconcile the parallel aspects of her life, the traditional and the mainstream, the East and the West, the real and the virtual. Hunting by Stars by ezhi-gkendmaanh. This is the sequel to Marrow Thieves, a past novel that is also featured in the Native American Heritage Month. Years ago, when plagues and natural disasters killed millions of people, much of the world stopped dreaming. Without dreams, people are haunted, sick, mad, unable to rebuild. The government soon finds that the indigenous people of North America have retained their dreams, an ability rumored to be housed in the very marrow of their bones. Soon, residential schools pop up or are reopened across the land to bring in the dreamers and harvest their dreams. 17-year-old French lost his family to these schools and has spent the years since heading north with his newfound family, a group of other dreamers who, like him, are trying to build and thrive as a community. But then French wakes up in a pitch-black room, locked in and alone for the first time in years, and he knows immediately where he is and what it will take to escape. Meanwhile, out in the world, his found family searches for him and dodges new dangers. School recruiters, a blood cult, even the land itself. When their paths finally collide, French must decide how far he is willing to go, and how many loved ones he is willing to betray in order to survive. This engrossing, action-packed, deftly drawn novel expands on the world of ezhi-gkendmaanh's award-winning The Marrow Thieves, and it will haunt readers long after they've turned the final page. Speaking Our Truth, A Journey of Reconciliation by Monique Gray Smith. Canada's relationship with its Indigenous people has suffered as a result of both the residential school system and the lack of understanding of the historical and current impact of those schools. Healing and repairing that relationship requires education, awareness, and increased understanding of the legacy and the impacts still being felt by survivors and their families. Guided by acclaimed Indigenous author Monique Gray Smith, readers will learn about the lives of survivors and listen to allies who are putting the findings of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission into action. Native Actors and Filmmakers, Visual Storytellers by Gary Robinson. Discover the unique lives and career paths of 12 Indigenous people who are actively working in the complex entertainment industry, either in front of or behind the camera. In addition to acting, their work includes motion picture, television, and digital production, in roles such as director, producer, writer, cinematographer, and editor. Included in these biographies are real-world descriptions of what each member of a production team does, as well as advice on what it takes to get started in the entertainment industry. The glossary in the back of the book highlights the terminology used in TV and film production, and the list of resources provides a variety of ways to obtain additional information about the industry. This marks the end of the teen book section. Next up is the adult section. This is the adult section of the Native American and Indigenous Peoples Heritage Reader's Advisory. The first book is The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson. Rosalie Ironwing has grown up in the woods with her father, Ray, a former science teacher who tells her stories of plants, of the stars, of the origins of the Dakota people. Until one morning, Ray doesn't return from checking his traps. Told she has no family, Rosalie is sent to live with a foster family in nearby Mankato, where the reserved, bookish teenager meets rebellious Gabby Makepeace in a friendship that transcends the damaged legacies they've inherited. On a winter's day many years later, Rosalie returns to her childhood home. A widow and mother, she has spent the previous 2 decades on her white husband's farm, finding solace in her garden even as the farm is threatened first by drought and then by a predatory chemical company. Now, grieving, Rosalie begins to confront the past, on a search for family identity and a community where she can finally belong. In the process, she learns what it means to be descended from women with souls of iron, women who have protected their families, their traditions, and a precious cache of seeds through generations of hardship and loss, through war and the insidious trauma of boarding schools. Weaving together the voices of 4 indelible women, The Seed Keeper is a beautifully told story of reawakening, of remembering our original relationship to the seeds, and through them, to our ancestors. This Town Sleeps by Dennis E. Staples. Set on an Ojibwe reservation in northern Minnesota, This Town Sleeps is the story of Marion Lafournier, a gay Ojibwe man, and his search for meaning in a town he cannot seem to leave. When he begins a romance with closeted former high school classmate Shannon, Marion finds himself struggling to connect with the volcanic and unstable man. One night, while roaming the dark streets of Geshig, Marion unknowingly brings to life a dog from underneath the elementary school playground. The mysterious revenant leads him to the grave of Caden Kelleher, an Ojibwe basketball star who was murdered at the young age of 17, and whose presence still lingers in the memories of the townsfolk. While investigating the fallen hero's death, Marion discovers family connections and an old Ojibwe legend that may be the secret to unraveling the mystery he has found himself in. Indian Horse by Richard Wagamisi. Saul Indian Horse is a child when his family retreats into the woods. Among the lakes and cedars, they attempt to reconnect with half-forgotten traditions and hide from the authorities who have been kidnapping Ojibwe youth. But when winter approaches, Saul loses everything: his brother, his parents, his beloved grandmother, and then his home itself. Alone in the world and placed in a horrific boarding school, Saul is surrounded by violence and cruelty. At the urging of a priest, he finds a tentative salvation in hockey. Rising at dawn to practice alone, Saul proves determined and undeniably gifted. His intuition and vision are unmatched. His speed is remarkable. Together, they open doors for him, away from the school into an all-Ojibwe amateur circuit, and finally within grasp of a professional career. Yet, as Saul's victories mount, so do the indignities and the taunts, the racism and the hatred, the harshness of a world that will never welcome him, tied inexorably to the sport he loves. Calling for a Blanket Dance by Oscar Hoquea. Oscar Hoquea's electric debut takes us into the life of ezhi-gkendmaanh, whose family, part Mexican, part Native American, is determined to hold on to their community despite obstacles everywhere they turn. Ever's father is injured at the hands of corrupt police on the border when he goes to visit family in Mexico, while his mother struggles to keep both her job and care for her husband. And young Ever is lost and angry at all he doesn't understand, at this world that seems to undermine his sense of safety. Ever's relatives all have ideas about who he is and who he should be. His Cherokee grandmother, knowing the importance of proximity, urges the family to move across Oklahoma to be near her, while his grandfather, watching their traditions slip away, tries to reunite Ever with his heritage through traditional Goade dances. Through it all, every relative wants the same, to remind Ever of the rich and supportive communities that surround him, there to hold him tight, and for Ever to learn to take the strength given to him to save not only himself, but also the next generation. How will this young man visualize a place for himself when the world hasn't made room for him to start with? Honest, heartbreaking, and ultimately uplifting, Calling for a Blanket Dance is the story of how ezhi-gkendmaanh finds his way home. My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. Jade Daniels is an angry, half-Indian outcast with an abusive father, an absent mother, and an entire town that wants nothing to do with her. She lives in her own world, a world in which protection comes from an unusual source, horror movies, especially the ones where a masked killer seeks revenge on a world that wronged them. And Jade narrates the quirky history of proof rock as if it is one of those movies. But when blood actually starts to spill into the waters of Indian Lake, she pulls us into her dizzying encyclopedic mind of blood and mass murderers, and predicts exactly how the plot will unfold. Yet even as Jade drags us into her dark fever dream, a surprising and intimate portrait emerges. A portrait of the scared and traumatized little girl beneath the Jason Voorhees mask. Angry, yes, but also a girl who easily cries, fiercely loves, and desperately wants a home. A girl whose feelings are too big for her body. My Heart is a Chainsaw is her story, her homage to horror and revenge and triumph. Night of the Living Res by Morgan Talty. Set in a Native community in Maine, Night of the Living Res is a riveting debut collection about what it means to be Penobscot in the 21st century and what it means to live, to survive, and to persevere after tragedy. In 12 striking luminescent stories, author Morgan Talty, with searing humor, abiding passion, and deep insight, breathes life into tales of family and a community as they struggle with a painful past and an uncertain future. A boy unearths a jar that holds an old curse, which sets into motion his family's unraveling. A man, while trying to swindle some pot from a dealer, discovers a friend passed out in the woods, his hair frozen into the snow. A grandmother suffering from Alzheimer's projects the past onto her grandson. And two friends, inspired by Antiques Roadshow, attempt to rob the tribal museum for valuable root clubs. A collection that examines the consequences and merits of inheritance. Night of the Living Res is an unforgettable portrayal of an Indigenous community and marks the arrival of a standout talent in contemporary fiction. Shutter by Ramona Emerson. Rita Todacini is a forensic photographer working for the Albuquerque police force. Her excellent photography skills have cracked many cases. She is almost supernaturally good at capturing details. In fact, Rita has been hiding a secret. She sees the ghosts of crime victims who point her towards the clues that other investigators overlook. As a lone portal back to the living for traumatized spirits, Rita is terrorized by nagging ghosts who won't let her sleep and who sabotage her personal life. Her taboo and psychologically harrowing ability was what drove her away from her hometown on the Navajo reservation where she was raised by her grandmother. It has isolated her from friends and gotten her into trouble with law, and now it might be what gets her killed. When Rita is sent to photograph the scene of a supposed suicide on a highway overpass, the furious, discombobulated ghost of the victim, who insists she was murdered, latches onto Rita, forcing her on a quest for revenge against her killers. And Rita finds herself in the crosshairs of one of Albuquerque's most dangerous cartels. Written in sparkling, gruesome prose, Shudder is a blood-chilling debut from one of crime fiction's most powerful new voices. Buffalo is the New Buffalo by Chelsea Vowell. Powerful stories of Métis futurism that envision a world without violence, capitalism, or colonization. Education is the New Buffalo is a metaphor widely used among Indigenous peoples in Canada to signify the importance of education to their survival and ability to support themselves, as once Plains nations supported themselves as buffalo peoples. The assumption is that many of the pre-contact ways of living are forever gone, so adaptation is necessary. But Chelsea Vowell asks, instead of accepting that the buffalo and our ancestral ways will never come back, what if we simply ensure that they do? Inspired by classic and contemporary speculative fiction, Buffalo is the New Buffalo explores science fiction tropes through a Métis lens. A two-spirit rougarou, or shapeshifter, in the 19th century tries to solve a murder in her community and joins the Nehiwa Powit of the Iron Confederacy in order to successfully stop Canadian colonial expansion into the West. A Métis man is gored by a radioactive bison, gaining super strength, but losing the ability to be remembered by anyone not related to him by blood. Nanites babble to babies in Cree. Virtual reality teaches transformation. Foxes take human form and wreak havoc on hearts. Buffalo roam free, and beings grapple with the thorny problem of healing from colonialism. Indigenous futurisms seek to discover the impact of colonization, remove its psychological baggage, and recover ancestral traditions. These 8 short stories of Métis futurism explore Indigenous existence and resistance through the specific lens of being Métis. Expansive and eye-opening, Buffalo is the New Buffalo rewrites our shared history in provocative and exciting ways. A Calm and Normal Heart by Chelsea T. Hicks. From Oklahoma to California, the heroes of A Calm and Normal Heart are modern-day adventurers, seeking out new places to call their own inside a nation to which they do not entirely belong. A member of the Osage tribe, author Chelsea T. Hicks' stories are compelled by an overlooked diaspora happening inside America itself, that of young Native people. In stories like Super Drunk, Text Soap, and Wetsa, iPhone lifestyles commingle with ancestral connection, strengthening relationships or pushing people apart, while generational trauma haunts individual paths. Broken partnerships and polyamorous desire signal a fraught era of modern love, even as old ways continue to influence how people assess compatibility. And in By Alcatraz, a Native student finds herself alone on campus over Thanksgiving break, seeking out new friendships during a national holiday she does not recognize. Leaping back in time, A Fresh Start Ruined inhabits the life of Florence, an Osage woman attempting to hide her origins while social climbing in mid-century Oklahoma. And in House of RGB, a young professional settles into a new home, intent on claiming her independence after a breakup, even if her ancestors can't seem to get out of her way. Whether in between college semesters or jobs, on the road to tribal dances, or escaping troubled homes, the characters of A Calm and Normal Heart occupied a complicated and often unreliable terrain. Chelsea T. Hicks brings sharp humor, sprawling imagination, and a profound connection to Native experience in a collection that will subvert many long-held assumptions for many readers and inspire hope along the way. Native American Love Stories and Other Stories by Jennifer Salt. From the imagination of an Ojibwe Mohawk comes the collection Native American Love Stories and Other Short Stories. The short stories collection includes endearing stories about a mommy and son family of witches, ghosts, rescue dogs, werewolves, vampires, spirits, vision quests, thunderbirds, face changers, DNA Indians, nanobots, unseen mythical forces, and love stories. Beginning our nonfiction section, Covered with Night is a story of murder and Indigenous justice by Nicole Eustace. An immersive tale of the killing of a Native American man and its far-reaching consequences for colonial America. In the summer of 1722, on the eve of a conference between the Five Nations of the Iroquois and British American colonists, two colonial fur traders brutally attacked an Indigenous hunter in colonial Pennsylvania. The crime set the entire mid-Atlantic on edge, with many believing that war was imminent. Frantic efforts to resolve the case created a contest between Native American forms of justice, centered on community, forgiveness, and reparations, and an ideology of harsh reprisal based on British law that called for the killer's execution. In a stunning narrative history based on painstaking original research, acclaimed historian Nicole Eustace reconstructs the crime and its aftermath, taking us into the worlds of Euro-Americans and Indigenous peoples in this formative period. A feat of reclamation evoking Laurel Thatcher Ulrich's A Midwife's Tale and Alan Taylor's William Cooperstown. Eustace's utterly absorbing account provides a new understanding of Indigenous forms of justice with lessons for our era. New Native Kitchen, Celebrating Modern Recipes of the American Indian by Freddie Bitsoe. From Freddie Bitsoe, the former executive chef at Midsitam Native Foods Cafe at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian, and James Beard award-winning author James O. Frioli. New Native Kitchen is a celebration of Indigenous cuisine, accompanied by original artwork by Gabriela Trujillo, and offering delicious dishes like cherry stone clam soup from the northeastern Wampanoag and spice-rubbed pork tenderloin from the Pueblo peoples. Bitsoe showcases the variety of flavor and culinary history on offer from coast to coast, providing modern interpretations of 100 recipes that have long fed this country. Recipes like chocolate bison chili, prickly pear sweet pork chops, and sumac seared trout with onion and bacon sauce combine the old with the new, holding fast to traditions while also experimenting with modern methods. In this essential cookbook, Bitsoe shares his expertise and culinary insights into Native American cooking, and suggests new approaches for every home cook. With recipes as varied as the people that inspired them, New Native Kitchen celebrates the Indigenous heritage of American cuisine. Reclaiming Two Spirits, Sexuality, Spiritual Renewal, and Sovereignty in Native America by Gregory D. Smithers. with a foreword by Raven E. Heavyrunner. Reclaiming Two Spirits decolonizes the history of gender and sexuality in Native North America. It honors the generations of Indigenous people who had the foresight to take essential aspects of their cultural life and spiritual beliefs underground in order to save them. Before 1492, hundreds of Indigenous communities across North America included people who identified as neither male nor female, but both. They went by Aksesi, Miati, Okisitakwe, or one of the hundreds of other tribally specific identities. After European colonizers invaded Indian country, centuries of violence and systematic persecution followed, imperiling the existence of people who today call themselves Two Spirits, an umbrella term denoting feminine and masculine qualities in one person. Drawing on written sources, archaeological evidence, art, and oral storytelling, Reclaiming Two Spirits spans the centuries from Spanish invasion to the present, tracing massacres and inquisitions and revealing how the authors of colonialism's written archives used language to both denigrate and erase Two-Spirit people from history. But as Gregory Smithers shows, the colonizers failed, and Indigenous resistance is core to the story. Reclaiming Two Spirits amplifies their voices, reconnecting their history to Native nations in the 21st century. We Are the Middle of Forever, Indigenous Voices from Turtle Island on the Changing Earth, edited by Deirdre and Stan Rushworth. Although for a great many people, the human impact on the Earth, countless species becoming extinct, pandemics claiming millions of lives, and climate crisis causing worldwide social and environmental upheaval, was not apparent until recently. This is not the case for all people or cultures. For the Indigenous people of the world, radical alteration of the planet and of life itself is a story that is many generations long. They have had to adapt, to persevere, and to be courageous and resourceful in the face of genocide and destruction. And their experience has given them a unique understanding of civilizational devastation. An innovative work of research and reportage, We Are the Middle of Forever places Indigenous voices at the center of conversations about today's environmental crisis. The book draws on interviews with people from different North America Indigenous cultures and communities, generations, and geographic regions, who share their knowledge and experience, their questions, their observations, and their dreams of maintaining the best relationship possible to all of life. A welcome antidote to the despair arising from the climate crisis, We Are the Middle of Forever brings to the forefront the perspectives of those who have long been attuned to climate change and will be an indispensable aid to those looking for new and different ideas and responses to the challenges we face. Unreconciled: Family, Truth, and Indigenous Resistance by Jesse Went. Jesse Went remembers the exact moment he realized that he was a certain kind of Indian, a stereotypical cartoon Indian. He was playing softball as a child when the opposing team began to war whoop when he was at bat. It was just one of many incidents that formed Went's understanding of what it means to be a modern Indigenous person in a society still overwhelmingly colonial in its attitudes and institutions. As the child of an American father and an Anishinaabe mother, Went grew up in Toronto with frequent visits to the reserve where his maternal relations lived. By exploring his family's history, including his grandmother's experience in residential school, and citing his own frequent incidents of racial profiling by police who'd stop him on the streets, Went unpacks the discrepancies between his personal identity and how non-Indigenous people view him. Wendt analyzes and gives voice to the differences between Hollywood portrayals of Indigenous peoples and lived culture. Through the lens of art, pop culture, and personal stories, and with disarming humor. He links his love of basketball and movies to such issues as cultural appropriation, Indigenous representation and identity, and Indigenous narrative sovereignty. Indeed, he argues that storytelling in all its forms is one of Indigenous people's best weapons in the fight to reclaim their rightful place. Wendt explores and exposes the lies that Canada tells itself, unravels the two founding nations myth, and insists that the notion of reconciliation is not a realistic path forward. Peace between First Nations and the state of Canada can't be recovered through reconciliation because no such relationship ever existed. Red Paint, the autobiography of a Coast Salish punk by Sasha Takwesoglu-Lapointe. Sasha Takwesoglu-Lapointe, a Coast Salish Indigenous woman, has always longed for a sense of home. As a child, her family moved around frequently, often staying in barely habitable church attics and trailers, dangerous places for young Sasha. As an adolescent determined to escape the poverty and abuse of her childhood in order to build a better future for herself and her people, Sasha throws herself headlong into the world, with little more to guide her than a passion for the thriving punk scene of the Pacific Northwest and a desire to live up to the responsibility of being the namesake of her beloved great-grandmother, a linguist who helped preserve her Indigenous heritage of Lushootseed, and one in a long line of powerful ancestors. Exploring what it means to be vulnerable in love and in art, while offering an unblinking reckoning with personal traumas as well as the collective historical traumas of colonialism and genocide that continue to haunt the Native peoples. Red Paint is an intersectional autobiography of lineage, resilience, and above all, the ability to heal that chronicles Sasha's struggles navigating a collapsing marriage while answering the call to greater purpose. Set against a backdrop of tour vans and the breathtaking beauty of Coast Salish ancestral land, and imbued with the universal spirit of punk, an ethos that challenges us to reclaim what's rightfully ours, our histories, our power, our traditions, and our truths. Red Paint is ultimately a story of the ways we learn to heal while fighting for our right to a place to call home. Thank you for joining me in exploring the many titles PGC MLS has to offer regarding Native American and Indigenous peoples' heritage. Be sure to check out our page on the Heritage Hub for book lists and more, including movies, biographies, and events throughout November.